Welcome everybody to our April 30th special council meeting for the city of Courtenay. I just want to start by respectfully acknowledging on the land which we're gathered is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of our land. And I'd like to pass it over to Councillor Hilling for a comment, if that's all right.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to acknowledge that we're all shocked and saddened by the tragedy at the Lapu Lapu Day Festival in Vancouver this past weekend. This was meant to be a joyous day of celebration for the Filipino community, and instead we're collectively mourning the 11 lives lost and many others seriously injured by a senseless act of violence. The youngest victim was just 5 years old. Our thoughts and hearts are with the victims, their families, friends, and loved ones, and the entire Filipino Canadian community during this time of mourning, both in the Lower Mainland and here at home in the Comox Valley and beyond. We also recognize the importance of supporting mental health in the aftermath of this tragedy and as a way of preventing harmful acts before they happen whenever possible. We honor those whose lives were taken far too soon and hold space for those left grieving in the wake of this devastating loss. We extend our deepest condolences to everyone affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hilling. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. So May 5th marks the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit people. It's a day to honor the lives lost to racialized and gendered violence and to reflect on the deep, ongoing pain experienced by families and communities across Canada. Thousands of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals have been disproportionately affected by violence. This national crisis is not just part of our history, it continues today. May 5th is also known as Red Dress Day, inspired by a wonderful, powerful art installation created in 2010 by Métis artist Jamie Black. Red dresses, which symbolize the missing and murdered, will be displayed throughout our community and across the country in recognition and remembrance. In Canada, more than 63% of Indigenous women have experienced physical or sexual assault in their lifetime. According to the Assembly of First Nations, Indigenous women are 4 times more likely than non-Indigenous women to be victims of violence, including homicide. They are nearly 3 times more likely to be reported missing. They are more than twice as likely to experience violence from a current or former partner. To show your support, you're invited to attend the Comox Valley Red Dress Day gathering on Monday, May 6th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Florence Filberg Centre in Courtenay. Hosted by the Indigenous Women's Sharing Society and community partners, the event will include an opening ceremony followed by a community walk. You can visit their Facebook page for more details. The national emergency demands our shared commitment to truth, reconciliation, and meaningful action. Let us support those leading the call for justice, amplify Indigenous voices, and work toward a future where everyone can live in safety and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. And we'll move into introduction of late items. I'm not aware of any. And we'll move into staff reports. Under operational services, we have the Fitzgerald Avenue Pedestrian Network review improvement option. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Shaw.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through yourself to members of council, I'm pleased to present a staff report, Fitzgerald Avenue Pedestrian Network review improvement option. The purpose of this report is to present council with the results of the pedestrian network review along the Fitzgerald corridor, seeking supportive direction for the improvement of 2 of the crosswalks, being the crosswalk located at 10th and as well as 14th of Fitzgerald Ave, with the addition of rapid flashing beacons at each of those locations, as well as the removal of 2 redundant crosswalks, both at 11th and at 12th Street. As council is aware, operational services made a vested effort over the previous few years to focus on pedestrian safety improvements within our community, focusing first and foremost on school zones and playground zones. But as you do those improvements, corridors such as Fitzgerald and Cliff, some of our more majors in our community, come up often in terms of inquiry with respect to the fluidity and movement of pedestrians safely across those corridors. And recently, this past year, the Fitzgerald corridor has risen to the top of that evaluation. So doing so, it was prudent to do a fulsome review of the entirety of the corridor and not just one of the specific crosswalks to ensure the redundancy of those crosswalks was required. And if not, what some of those recommendations may be. as well as recognizing that the corridor itself is quite wide. The existing corridor is built to a fairly aged fashion of a ministry fashion with a double left turn lane. There's some addition of bike lanes that have happened quite some time ago. It's a fairly lengthy corridor to get across. I think the corridor in itself is about 20 meters total distance from sidewalk to sidewalk. As well as it's a fairly busy corridor, as articulated within the memorandum that is attached to the staff report. On average, seeing about 8,000 vehicles a day using that corridor. Recognizing this corridor as well provides mobility for individuals within our networks to seek safe passage to schools as well through some consultation with SD 71 and the Safe Active Schools program, as well as safe routes to schools that have been developed in the past. So giving all of those things consideration, the review has articulated that there are 2 crosswalks indeed that could stand for improvement with the typical RRFB that we would see facilitated within our community, but as well recognizing the lack of need for 2 crosswalks that currently stand. The removal of 2 and the amendment of 2 to be much more safe, inviting crosswalks would improve the corridor's usage as an overall. And so that's why you'll see the recommendation in the staff report is to improve 2 of those, remove the redundancy. I'll offer the crosswalks in themselves and the recommendation is minimal in terms of impact in this fiscal, understanding that there are some works to be done with respect to the transportation plan. As well as pedestrian connectivity, our Safe Routes to Schools program, and our Safe to Active program with SD 71. So there's a lot of work that's happening in the background, and so we wanted to consider all aspects before making a fulsome recommendation for some extreme civil works within the corridor. But these improvements that are recommended would be substantive enough, I believe, from a staff's perspective, to provide significant improvements and movement within that corridor for the users. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your verbal report and for the memo, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the report. To me, it seems to make a fair bit of sense. I guess my only concern is that, I mean, 8,000 cars, is that per day? Is that what it was? And what does that compare to for like Fifth or Cliff? I guess depends on where on Cliff or Lerwick. What are those numbers like compared to those bigger streets?
It's a great question. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Frisch. Unfortunately, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I would suspect that it's on the upward end of the total vehicle passage on any one of our corridors in any given day. I would expect Cliff to be of a higher caliber in terms of movement. It is listed as an arterial versus this is a collector industrial corridor, so it's a little bit less than, but it's still a large amount of vehicles for our particular community.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned that if we get rid of those 2 and those ones in the middle, you might get pedestrians that are somewhere between 10th and 14th, let's say on 12th, and find like it is kind of inconvenient. They will be maybe running across. But I suppose that could be resolved down the line by adding another crossing at some point if we thought that was valuable and worth the trade-off of slowing down traffic more often. Would that be your assertion or your assessment?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It was noted within the memo. I think 5.6 of the memo speaks to jaywalking and trying to eliminate opportunities for jaywalking, encouraging pedestrians that are using the corridor to use the enhanced corridors. And so it speaks to wayfinding signs are certainly things that we can do in the short term to amend that. I think as well, it speaks to the ability to broadly communicate and notify public that the crosswalks have been changed and enhanced. And we do recognize the distance between those crosswalks would be enlarged as a result, but they would be much more inviting just given the way that they would be designed and the rapid flashing beacons that would be there, showing conscious effort for crossing and staged awareness for those pedestrians.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely a great improvement with the flashes. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch, and next is Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. I appreciated the report, and I have to say I did have some challenges with trying to understand the grid rating system that was used there. And it part of the reason I was digging so deeply is I was trying to understand why the crosswalk at 11th did not rate particularly well, despite being a sort of a preferred route to school. It seems to me that, and we also have a category for vulnerable road users, and I would think children would fall squarely into that category as well. And that's, really half of the weighting. I guess my concern is the distance between 10th and 14th. I haven't clocked it, but I would say it's probably around 200 to 300 meters. That's a long way, particularly to expect children to walk out of their way if that's not the way they usually get to school. And my concern there is that by leaving such a long gap on such a very busy street, that we may we may encourage jaywalking. And one of the factors in the grid was accidents, and there were 2 accidents that happened at 10th and 14th. It's a fairly, that stat could change very quickly for any of those. It's either 1 or 0. So I guess I want, if you could talk a bit more about the grid and why you think that a crossing at 11th with flashers would not be an appropriate solution given and what the reasons for that would be.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for the question through the mayor to Councillor Cole Hamilton. So great questions. Accumulation of data really to look at through the warrant process. The #1 ranking, obviously pedestrian usage, with 10th and 14th ranking far more higher in terms of overall usage on any one given day. There is a safe route ranking and vulnerable user ranking for all of the crosswalks, noting that both 11th and 12th were relatively low in terms of those overall usage. And then as well, collisions, so pedestrian incidents within the last 5 years ranked higher at the other 2. So those particular 2, 14th and 10th, ranked the highest. The last consideration with respect to distance, and I appreciate your commentary about someone walking up 11th, knowing that that was historically their crossing. When we look at pedestrian movements, we look at them in a sphere of about 100-meter distance and where the next active place could be. 100 meters is a reasonable expectation for someone to walk to find a safe crossing. And if you're walking up 11th, 10th is only 93 meters away. And if you're walking up 12th, vice versa, 14th is only 100 meters away. So the distance between the crosswalk that's at 10th Street and 14th is, you're correct, 300 meters. But if you're walking up both 11th and 12th to get to one crosswalk either way, it would be only a 90 to 100 meter distance difference.
Okay, I understand that. I believe it said that at least 100 meters is required, or is distance between is warranted. 93 isn't all that different from 100. I guess I'm wondering what would be if we were wanting to ensure that the traditional route to school did have a crosswalk and were to install one at 11th, other than the cost of the, I forget the 4-letter acronym for the flashers, but of those, other than the cost of that, I'm having difficulty imagining what concerns there would be. And I think it's important to think as we're considering greater density in our city, that is an area of great density. It's an area where a lot of people either don't have a car or use it sparingly because they can walk to a lot of things. There's more pedestrian and multimodal activity probably there than almost anywhere else in our city. And I think removing 3 crosswalks is, I find that hard to explain unless there's some very strong factor beyond the cost of simply putting up flashers. I was wondering what would be the reason for not having a crosswalk there.
Yep, fair. It's a great question. Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Cole Hamilton. Again, really, we talk about the warrant process and evaluation for crosswalks, for safe crosswalks, continuity of the corridor in itself from a driver's perspective as well. So we want to consider all of those factors. When you look at crosswalks that are underutilized, then I'll give a for instance, if you've often driven in one particular direction time over and time over, and there's no one at that crosswalk, the next time you're there, you don't anticipate someone to be at that crosswalk. And then there's that odd time there are, and you're quite surprised by it. That's often what's happening on these very busy corridors when there's a lot of other things happening. When you have a consistency of application of one crosswalk over another, they become extremely redundant and they become unvisible or less visible to the driver, which create an unsafe environment. So that's one aspect. The other one is continuity of corridor connections. So there's a crosswalk on Cliff at 14th and there's a crosswalk at 10th in terms of crossing over. And so fluidity off that corridor to continue traffic from the Riverway Trail through into the pedestrian locations at which we expect people to go. There was also consideration when the the program was built for the safe routes to school through eCall. It was quite some time ago. And so now the Courtenay L is going to remain in play, and it's actually been rezoned and revamped. There's a reason to relook at what that particular corridor would look like in terms of a safe route to school for that particular school, because there hasn't been one drafted. So there's quite a few variables that play into it. And one would be just the continuity of existing crossings, the amount of crossings that would look like on that particular corridor.
Okay, sorry, I probably have further comments on that, but there are other lights here. I'd just be
Sure.
curious to know if any of my colleagues feel that perhaps more than 2 crosswalks would be required or desired there.
And if I may, I'll just close. You made a comment, Councillor Cole Hamilton, about removing 3 crosswalks, and there actually is only 4. They just reviewed the other road for the potential through warrant criteria, so it was determined that it was unwarranted.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think the that acronym, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, not to be confused with the round rapid flashing beacons, which has the same acronym for some reason. With that, we'll pass over to Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. I maybe will comment on Councillor Cole Hamilton's question later after I hear other folks, but my question was around the accessibility piece. I was happy to see this installation of tactile paving at the curbs. And I just was curious whether we are automatically doing that when we're changing or making improvements. Are we automatically including accessibility improvements in general?
It's a great question. Thank you, through the mayor, to Councillor Moore. Generally speaking, my answer from a staff and a civil construction perspective would be yes. Obviously, meeting standards, curb letdowns, tactiles would be above and beyond. One that we are recommending for consideration through the SDS application that we would, and that's really where the staff report speaks to, is conceding to that amendment that there's a recognition of a need, and that be in alignment with our future construction for consideration as we're seeing it pop up in our neighboring communities. We want to ensure that we're meeting those standards and doing the best that we can to support individuals in need. I'll offer as well these particular crossings for the RFE. There's a note within, I think, the staff report or maybe the memo about lighting within the corridor, being that most of the lights are BC Hydro lighting and there's no galvanized poles in that particular area. So the lighting is a bit low and it's challenging for pedestrians at night. So there is a new product which we're deploying out on Old Island Highway. We'd look to seek to redeploy that in these particular locations as well. So they are solar powered illumination to support the RFB as well. And so there would be a light that is specifically dedicated to the crossings in this particular format.
Thanks. I just want to say I'm really hoping that we can see more accessibility improvements. There's a lot of, as Councillor Cole Hamilton mentioned, there's a lot of pedestrians, people with motorized wheelchairs, etc., in that corridor. So hopefully we'll see more improvements. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore, and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I'm in agreement that this should be a high priority area for some improvements for the pedestrian network. I've certainly observed in the evenings driving down Fitzgerald how difficult it is to see pedestrians crossing. It's a really wide crossing for a person to make at night, and I've stopped along there before for a pedestrian crossing and almost been rear-ended because the vehicle behind me is not seeing the same thing. So I think this is going to be a welcome change in this area. And as we know, there has been some accidents as well. So very much in support of moving this forward. In reading the report, I am also not sure, I mean, redundancy is pointed out, but I'm not entirely clear what the downside of redundancy with a crosswalk is. I mean, it's defined or it's pointed out in the report, but it does mention that that it restricts traffic flow. But I mean, a vehicle can turn left, right, or move through every intersection along this corridor. And to me, that would likely have a bigger impact on traffic flow than a single pedestrian, whether they cross at one intersection or another. It stops traffic when they cross, and it's the number of pedestrians, not the number of crossings, that would impact traffic. So Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that I understand the downside to having at least one more in this zone. Understanding that, yeah, maybe there is a standard of what would be a reasonable distance, but, you know, personally, if I lived on 11th and was used to crossing there, and now I had to do 100 meters one way and 100 meters back, I might be jaywalking. It's a pretty long detour on foot to expect people to do, especially if they've been used to having the crossing there for some time. So I do think that that is something that we should really consider as maybe a third one. I mean, the cost of these are not huge. And I did have the same observation about this zone as Councillor Cole Hamilton, is that it is slated for higher density, but it is also some of the first apartment buildings in our community were built there. This has been a walkable, kind of urban focused neighborhood for quite some time. So I don't see a huge downside in having at least one more in this area. I take the point that maybe we don't need it at every single intersection, but expecting someone to walk several blocks to a lit crosswalk, I think is maybe going maybe a little too far in that direction. And I would hate for us to remove sidewalks and then or crosswalks and see people jaywalking. Might defeat the purpose that we're after here. So I would probably support doing a third improvement. And I think those flashers are really gonna help avoid traffic collisions. And I would also point out that this area is a nice straight street. And whether those are well used in places or not, it's highly visible to cars driving down that road, that they'll be able to see those flashers light up for blocks because there's few impediments for vehicles to see them, just given the design of that road. So I don't think people necessarily need to be habituated to needing to stop in those areas just because of the highly visible design of where these are going to be located. So I don't know if I share a huge concern in them not being used frequently enough. And I certainly see people crossing in all of these locations on a regular basis when I travel through that zone. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Sure, if I may, thank you, Councillor McCollum. Just in response, I just want to point out there is an engineering standard review behind the review process, and TAC warrants, so Transportation Association of Canada, provides the criteria for review. So there was a very technical analysis, and I appreciate there's a difficulty in reducing service levels that pre-exist. I would offer that if we were to build it again tomorrow fresh, that it likely, as a result, not meeting the criteria, would not be recommended to do that. So just points of consideration. You'll note through the criteria as well, 10th Street was quite controversial through the process of review, given its proximity to a signalized intersection. The reason it actually made it through the warrant criteria is because of being at such high use of seeing an average of 38 crossings per day, but under a typical urban corridor standard, being that it's only 93 meters from a signalized intersection, it would not be warranted as well. And so it's this balance of what we've inherited versus meeting technical urban standards for design through engineering analysis to evolution from historic to where we would like to be from a pedestrian network. So just offer that for commentary, but I appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McCollum. Yeah, and it does kind of remind me of 2nd Street when there were sidewalks on both sides, and then when it was redone, then they were on one side. And yeah, kind of the discussion we had around that. Councillor Frisch is next, but I do see Councillor Zwicker is online as well. Councillor Frisch.
I had a question, a thought, I suppose, about like the 11th Street corridor being pretty popular because it does line up all the way with that crossing down at Cliff. And maybe I missed it, but the crossing at Cliff on 11th, that would remain, I assume. And I just know if I'm, not just walking to DQ, but other places, walking down 5th Street is quite efficient. So I guess we'd be losing that continuity for pedestrians. cyclists as well, probably. Some kids would probably use those crosswalks, maybe not adults or more confident cyclists. I actually don't love walking that much. I prefer sometimes driving down Fitzgerald, and but I'm struggling to see how I'll be impacted if there's another set. So I'm also thinking like, you know, is it such a big deal to keep that corridor open? And also the cultural shift we maintain if we make it really easy for people to walk is significant for me as just a, you know, a way of developing our streets. Can you tell me what the cost is for a set, like for each one? I don't know if it was in there. I'm sorry if I missed it.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you to the mayor, to Councillor Frisch. On average for construction amendment to an existing crossing to one that would facilitate new letdowns and an RFB would be between $8,000 and $12,000
For each intersection or for each side?
for each intersection. So for
So
both sides.
relatively inexpensive, would you, am I hearing that right? Like $12,000?
Be between 8 and 12,000. Yeah, we do work with our partners at ICBC through some of their programs to seek financial aid and support through this, and so that depends on their annual fiscal and whether or not they can contribute. We do partner with them on a per annual basis, but yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if staff would be amenable to coming back to talk more about putting in another one, or if you'd want to see, like, if we really want to see another one in there, would you prefer us just to make a statement today, or how would you like to move forward?
Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm here to provide the technical expertise and the engineering behind the analysis. The crosswalks that are warranted are recommended for improvement. If council would like to retain one, given its current level of service exists today, that being 11th, we can certainly do so, but an amendment to the resolution will be required.
Okay, well,
And I
I'm
would
going
be
to take a
supportive
pause.
of receiving that today. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to take a pause and see what else comes up from council. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I do know that a fair bit of community members do go down that corridor, also not just to get to DQ, but to actually get to the Riverside Trail, which goes down to 11th as well. So I do like the idea of keeping 11th. I guess the question that I had was related to, in the staff report, it speaks to, in part, one of the reasons why 14th and 10th scored the lowest, which is why it was prioritized, was due to recorded collisions from 2019 to 2023. We don't have those numbers here. And so what was, in terms of pedestrian safety, what was the next, assuming that 14th and 10th had some of the higher collision numbers, and there's pedestrian collision ranking, and I don't know what that's the ranking based on the amount of collision data that we have from ICBC. And so, yeah, do we have the actual hard numbers for each of these crossings?
Yeah, thank you for the question through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. I believe they're listed in the memorandum through the analysis. So there is, I think there was 2 incidents in the last 3 years at 14th and 1 at 10th. But I don't have all of the numbers just off the top of my head. I don't
Right.
recall reading through the analysis anything at 11th, 13th, or 12th.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
I was going to move an amended version of the resolution, but I see that Councillor McCollum also. Okay. So the change would just be to move 11th from up one line. So it'd say Fitzgerald Avenue at 10th, 11th, and 14th Streets, and to remove the redundant crosswalk singular located at Fitzgerald Avenue and 12th. And no other changes.
Right.
But
Yep, just standing by for staff. And it's been moved in second. Is there any comments or questions? I know Councilor McCollum had your light on while we're waiting for staff. Okay. Yeah. Councilor Cole-Hamilton.
yeah, thanks. I think for many of the reasons stated, and I think that given that the cost of installing this is a very, very inexpensive type of improvement to pedestrian and active transportation infrastructure. And so I think having heard that it's only $8,000 to $12,000, it I think makes it easier, certainly for me, to land on the decision of wanting to retain that crossing, and for all the other reasons stated. And I think particularly as it's an existing route to school, I know that kids seem to be they're much less likely to walk walk all the way here and then cross, than will walk all the way back up there. And rather than trying to change their behavior, perhaps we could just try and adapt to what they're already doing and keep them safe.
All right, and with that, we do have it up on the screen now. So just if council could take a look, make sure that captures your intent. All right, and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, just to follow up on those comments, at the risk of not moving things along any quicker. Yeah, these crossing improvements are probably one of the items that we have received the most amount of positive feedback from in the community. I would say almost without exception, when one goes in, we hear something either through email or in passing, and I see nodding heads, and I know it to be true from the first ones that we got until, ones that went in last year. So just given that it's not a huge cost burden to the city, and that this really does support walkability, which is a huge priority for this council, I think that really the positives outweigh the negatives here, and in adapting what we're delivering to the community, even if it's not completely in line with the current standards. So just wanted to emphasize that and support the amendment or the resolution as amended. Thanks.
Thanks very much. And I believe because it was moved that way, we don't call it amended. Is that correct? Yep. So, but what was recommended, yeah. I guess the amended recommendation, if that makes sense. Yeah. Fantastic. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Just since I haven't spoken, I do note the liquor store is between 10th and 11th. Yeah. So there's probably a fair amount of traffic coming out of either side of there, bringing cases of beer back home and such. I want to recognize staff concern that potentially a vehicle stops for the crosswalk at one and then stops for the crosswalk at the other. And I think that's part of what's being recommended in the way of continuity, but I certainly am not going to vote against this, given, the majority's view that if we want to err, we want to err on the side of pedestrian safety. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, for those comments. Most of the comments that I have been covered. The only thing that jumped out at me in this report, and I may have missed it in previous reports, but I was very excited to see the crosswalks being referred to as zebra crosswalks, which is what I learned when I lived in South Africa, but I haven't seen that in Canada being referred to as that. So I was very excited by that. With that, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, great discussion. And we'll move on to the Urban Forest Strategy Operational Services Update, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Shaw again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, through yourself to the members of council, staff are pleased to present a report on the Urban Forest Strategy Operational Services Update. I'll ask Sue Carmichael, the manager of Park Services, to speak to the report more broadly, but just wanted to acknowledge the hard work of staff to bring this report to fruition. A lot of depth and detail. I'll acknowledge that as well. There's probably more questions than answers, maybe, and I think that's why we're here to present this information to helps council get a glimpse into what is accomplished on a per annum basis through operational services, but also understand that there's a significant opportunity in front of us to continue the urban forest strategy within our community, utilizing public partnerships, and it's really the foundation of this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carmichael.
Excellent.
There you go. Thank you, through Mayor and members of council. Good afternoon. My name's Stu Carmichael. I'm the manager of Park Services, and it's my pleasure to present the Urban Forest Strategy Update Report to council today. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide you with an overview of the ongoing and future work being carried out under the Urban Forestry Strategy. highlight the contributions of the Operational Services Department, particularly the Urban Forest and Natural Areas UFNA section of the Parks Department. Seek your support for a proposed 5-year tree planting program aimed at advancing the city's urban canopy goals. And finally, seek direction for staff to investigate the opportunities for the development and deployment of 2 new tree-related programs included in the financial implications. The City of Courtenay's 2019 Urban Forest Strategy outlines a 30-year vision for a connected, extensive, and resilient urban forest. The strategy is embedded in the official community plans and aligns with the city's goals around livability, climate resilience, and natural asset protection. Our urban canopy target is 34 to 40%, with only 5% of that existing canopy on public land, making partnerships and private land initiatives critical to achieving our target. The strategy is guided by a bold vision and 5 clear goals. 1, plan strategically, manage proactively, protect prudently, grow intentionally, and 5, partner effectively. Within each of these goals, there lies multiple indicators and actions. The recommendations from this report are taken directly from the goals and the action section of the Urban Forest Strategy. The adoption of the Urban Forest Strategy has allowed operations to reinvent the arboriculture section by creating the UFNA section in 2019. This section now manages all natural areas of the city and all aspects related to the management and maintenance of the Urban Forest Strategy service levels. This includes the management and oversight of nearly 8,600 inventoried public trees, over 60 public access green spaces, and 65 kilometers of treed edges within the city. Divisional staff handle a vast array of operational tasks, including maintaining a comprehensive tree inventory system through Tree Plotter. This software program tracks all city-owned trees and the work performed on those green assets, including risk assessments, planting programs, plant health care, and reactive requests for service across all natural areas. The UFNA division relies on a combination of contracted services and additional reassigned staff from other park sections, all in the effort to support key operations like risk management, routine maintenance, emergent abatement measures, and effective program deployment. Staff also provide specialized expertise for internal support across planning, development, engineering, and operational services. Since 2018, nearly 1,200 trees have been planted in our community, approximately 200 trees annually. Planting streams include park and public specimen trees, around 10 trees per year. Planting opportunities are becoming limited as many parks have reached our canopy capacity for these single specimen trees. Restoration plantings is a low-cost area of planting focusing on habitat development, averaging roughly 90 trees per year, a lot of that coming through grant funding. Street tree plantings are the highest cost and require the most maintenance, averaging about 90 trees per year associated with new developments. The majority of the funding for this program comes from development contributions. The proposed 5-year tree planting program will not only help support the strategy's targets of planting 300 public trees a year and another 850 private planted trees per year, but also set the stage for further program development and enhancements that will be required to meet our urban forest strategy goals. The program highlights in this document a street tree request program. A tree request program would increase street tree plantings on public land in areas of the city that did not have the opportunity for developers to plant trees as part of earlier developments, and will also be able to target areas of low canopy cover throughout the city. The tree voucher program, this type of program would see trees being planted on private land with no increase to the annual maintenance costs, and will require a minor investment in annual funding. The city would support a portion of the costs associated with the purchase of a tree. This program could be funded by the Tree Planting Reserve Fund. For example, the city of Nanaimo is reaching close to 4,000 vouchers claimed in just the first 5 years of a program similar to that. We will also continue to work together internally to align responsibilities and improve the implementation of the urban forest strategy and the tree bylaw. This includes ensuring green infrastructure priorities and are being implemented through capital and operational projects. The Operational Services Department current service levels affords the Park Service Division adequate funding to plant close to 190 trees annually. This includes initial planting, watering, mulching, pruning, with the annual maintenance increase of approximately $10,500 a year. The proposed 5-year plan would increase annual planting to 278 trees by 2028, expanding capital costs to roughly $192,000 a year with $35,000 a year in added maintenance. Expanding the city's planting program by close to 46% over 5 years could result in an extra 334 more trees on top of what we could do today, resulting in a modest increase in annual maintenance costs, requiring an annual operation budget increase of roughly $25,000 a year in 2025 and an escalating capital investment over the next 3 years. Today, we are requesting the following actions from you. That council receive the Urban Forest Strategy Operational Services Update Report for information and direct staff to implement the 5-year tree planting program by supporting the annual financial components of this plan. And that staff be directed to prepare an additional report providing information including annual costs associated with the creation and the development of both the tree voucher program and a tree request program. Thank you for your time and continue to support the Courtenay's growing and resilient urban forest. I can take.
Excellent. Thanks very much for the report. Much appreciated. Looking at any councillors that have any questions. Councillor Frisch.
Thanks for the report. No questions. I'm really excited to see this and particularly excited about the tree voucher program. I think it's a great opportunity for those people that want to have, another tree on their lot. I guess a question with it is, I guess staff would come up with what kind of trees we're selling at a discounted rate, something that would be easy for people that they would want, I guess, for starters, of the right size and so on and so forth. So is that already been contemplated, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, through Mayor to Councillor Frisch. Yes, talked about through and through for sure, and it would definitely be part of our program. And why it wasn't included in this report was those fine details were starting to add up to the point of which nurseries would we be working at and which trees would we want people to plant on their properties, and so that we're maintaining the proper inventory of trees that even if it's on private property, we don't want them just to go out and get trees that aren't kind of going to be valuable to the urban forest. Yeah.
Of course. Well, thanks very much, and I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the report. I think it's really valuable for us to have this kind of scan backwards at where we've gotten to since this policy has been implemented, and then looking ahead at what our objectives are. And I think this is very much in line with the things that I think that the city should be striving for. I also wanted to just highlight the idea of the tree voucher program. I think this is a great opportunity to, as a strategy for engaging with the public on this, especially perhaps people that are newer to the community and weren't around when we did the original engagement and some of this policy work. One thing I do wonder, I did have the question that, I don't know that we want to give out a $25 voucher to say cedar hedging, just, given that it's not exactly drought resistant planting, and that there's maybe some species of trees that we don't want to subsidize. But then it made me think about a program that the city of Vancouver did years ago, where they just had, I think twice a year, they had somewhere where their residents could come. I don't know if it was a public works yard or what it was, but that they could go and choose from city ordered plants at a discount. I think they probably had to pay $20, but I do wonder if that would actually lead to more planting than people simply going and buying a tree at a nursery that they would have bought anyway, and then thinking, oh, I could get $25 back from the city for this. Because I mean, a tree does cost a lot more than $25. So I don't know that, like, if we're talking about a $25 rebate, that would necessarily like motivate someone to go and dig a hole in their backyard for a new tree. But perhaps, you know, promoting coming and choosing from species that that are, you know, arborists understand are a benefit to the urban tree canopy. Maybe that would be, and also, you know, it's kind of a push in the spring perhaps, or maybe in the fall when it's easy to have a tree survive a planting. So anyway, those are just some thoughts that I had around this, and I'm very supportive of using some of that reserve, tree planting reserve. I can't remember exactly what we call it, but I mean, it does seem like a rational use for those funds. And, you know, we could just basically use it until those funds are not available or until they're replenished. It doesn't necessarily have to be an annual thing. But yeah, I do like the idea of getting our residents involved in this. So thanks.
Thank you. Great comments. Very many comments that we've had discussions about the new program and what those details look like, and making sure that we do get the right trees out there. And that was one idea, is keeping the trees at the yard, but then also then staff implications of who looks after those trees, where do they go if no one picks them up? And I think the NAMO is more of a $25 voucher for about $100 tree. So it's a significant tree that you get at a significant discounted price, working with a local nursery, being subsidized by the city. But in the fine details to come, hopefully.
Mr. Shaw. Oh, hang on.
Oh, sorry.
If I may just add, thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor McCollum, just, you know, an extension of Mr. Carmichael's comments. There's like all of those things are great commentary. Those are things that we've contemplated. And that's part of the reason why it's, let's take a step back and come up with a fulsome plan in terms of what a program could look like. Because there's a variety as you look across the industry and, you know, through municipalities, and economy of scale comes into question, understanding what our local vendors are willing and able to supply on our behalf. Respectfully, I think some of the major municipalities in the Lower Mainland have their own nurseries, and so they grow their own trees, which is really, really great for them. We don't necessarily have those opportunities today, but that was the complexity of the discussion that really formed much of the dialogue through the development of the staff report today, is what could that look like, how best to do that, and if we were to purchase trees ahead of time for a program, would we have to stage it in a way to ensure that if those trees didn't get picked up by residents because the demand was low at any one particular year, that we had already, you know, placated spaces for those trees within our natural or urban environment in the event that they didn't get chosen. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it, and I think that's part of the options analysis that we'll look at as staff as we bring back those options to council, and they can consider what a rebate program might look like, what the value of that program might look like, and how that program may escalate over time, given our ability to broadly or publicly communicate and get a degree of engagement with our community and understand what the desire from our community is. And hopefully it's an escalating desire, so we can continue to build this through economies of scale and demand. But we want to be mindful of that first kind of step into the world as to what that looks like, so we don't overcommit, so we end up having to destroy or potentially not use trees that we have otherwise purchased for a program. Thanks.
Excellent. Appreciate that clarity, given the fact that I guess kind of like a puppy, somebody might come in and they like this one, but not that one. And so, yeah, fair enough. Appreciate that. Yeah, and we have Councillor Jolicoeur online.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to start off by sharing my appreciation to all those that put the staff report together. I really feel like this was the update that I was looking for in terms of all the great work that our operations team does to address some of the goals in the urban forest strategy, but also the public. We get a fair bit of commentary around how we're balancing the increase to our density of housing in the community with our tree canopy. And so really appreciate the level of detail in the staff report, particularly under the policy analysis that starts on page 6, listing all the documentation. And I think it's really reflective of the different ways that the city of Courtenay is committed to advancing, supporting, you know, a future community that addresses climate change while also providing the amenities that make our community great. And so I do have a fair bit of questions, particularly around some of the information in here that I think really brings us up to speed around the realities of the department. I think my first question, a little surprised to see, I think starting on page 3 under tree risk management. And it's kind of embedded in there that there's about, I think, a 300% increase from 2019 to 2024 on tree abatement. And so I'm just wondering if staff can speak to that. That's a significant increase over a short period of time. Factors that play into that, ways in which we might want to mitigate that. I imagine that has, especially for the abatement that happens by contractors, I imagine that has a financial impact on the city. But wondering if you can speak to, what we might be able to look at and what mitigating factors we're looking at, maybe trying to reduce that number.
Yeah, great question, through Mayor to Councillor Joclair. It is a big increase, and a lot of that, there's a couple of different reasons hopefully I can touch on, and we can get more clarity on that. A lot of that was a small portion of that, was a catch up from past practices as we implemented the 2019 urban forest strategy and created the new division in the park staff. There was a lot of leftover and long lasting tree issues that we had to manage to kind of bring up to our new policies and procedures in that case. Unfortunately, the other part of that is a large portion was due to negative impacts from developments. So as greenfield developments came in and we lost a lot of tree canopy along those tree edges, those trees became weak because they've lost all their community members in that forest. So then we had to manage a lot of forest edges through the new developments that arose. And again, to kind of continue on this road of trees mortality, but the drought going on 4 years ago now, 4 summers ago, and sort of continued on. So 3 and 4 summers ago, we had a really drought-like conditions that had a hard time on natural state trees in around the city, and we've had to kind of manage those trees. And unfortunately, it does come at a cost, and with contractors getting involved as well as city staff kind of really looking at mitigation for that mortality. And of course, climate change. I mean, I guess you can wrap that drought around what we might be kind of looking and being up against moving forward. I think is our new reality of how many trees that we'll have to be looking after on a yearly basis.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that really articulates the kind of balance that we're grappling with while increasing density for housing. It does have an impact on the natural environment around us. So, Mayor, if I can, a second question. I can't see who's in the room, but I guess my second question, then I'll cede the floor if there's others. In the staff report, and I am generally supportive of the 2 new programs. I'm looking forward to seeing the staff report. But under the voucher program, you've estimated about 200 by 2029. And so curious how we landed on that number. It feels a little underwhelming. I would love to see us aim for more. Of course, this is a private-public partnership, and hoping to see the public get really excited about this, and recognizing that there'll probably have to be some sort of communication plan associated with this. But wondering, that feels a little conservative to me, but love to hear how we landed on that 200 in what would be, I guess, 4 years. So.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. We did land on that number as we were kind of combing through the details of what a voucher program might look like. And I think we started with only 25 vouchers in the pilot year, and then to 50, and then another year of 50, and then 100, and then 200 was kind of, where we got to. But again, we sort of pedaled back on those fine details to get this staff report in front of council so that we can start these discussions and get a little more clear on the details of what that voucher program. And now with our partner city of Nanaimo doing so well, we might have to kind of reassess what those numbers might be able to look like in 5 years' time. Because it is a big goal of the urban forest strategy is to be able to plant 850 trees a year on private on private land. I mean, that's going to be a lot of community engagement. That's going to be a lot of getting the community involved, and maybe this voucher system or a tree giveaway, maybe it reflects in that.
Mr. Shaw.
Through the mayor to Councilor Jolicoeur, if I may just add to that, it's a great point of conversation. And as I alluded to earlier in my response to Councilor McCollum, it's really about engaging community and seeing how supportive community is to development of a program, but as well as understanding what the financial impacts might look like for a variety of program options. And so, yeah, maybe to call us out in the report, it's a little bit of an under promise and maybe hopefully over deliver kind of a mentality to that. Really all we're doing is benchmarking off our neighboring communities, just relative to size and understanding that, you know, the city of Nanaimo is pushing out 4,000 vouchers over 5 years and their population is well over 100. So it was reasonable to assume that we could see something like that. But notably, if our community demand is there and council's willing, we can provide an annual estimates on the program through the budget development process to ensure that we're meeting the criteria and the demand, as well as acknowledging through the RFP process or a process as we go out to community, to our businesses, to ensure that they can supply what we're hoping to obtain and achieve within, you know, the guidelines of these types of programs that hopefully will be long-standing and fluid programs within operational services. I'll acknowledge as well that staff time is required through all of these processes, right? And so that's not yet understood what the impact is through some of these programs. Obviously, the voucher ones would be, you know, the homeowners would be dealing with that. But if we go to an infill program to try and, you know, gap some of those tree canopy within our community, those will be on staff or through contract services. And so we want to be supportive of that. And recognizing, excuse me as well. And I know this wasn't particularly a part of the question, but just as food for thought as I go through this process of articulating some of these issues, the thoughts around the financial implications. The cost of trees in the first 3 to 5 years is quite extensive relative to its overall life cycle. And so we want to acknowledge that, and the amount of time that's dedicated through our parks team to go out and water and maintain and manage to ensure that they are going to meet the potential of which we hope them to achieve over their lifespan. And so we want to acknowledge the time and staff and grow into these programs so that we can be supportive of the program long term, and that it is a meaningful outcome beyond the generation that is here today. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for the clarification. And maybe I'll just clarify one thing on that. You talked about the yearly kind of reevaluation potentially if it does really well. If it sells out, you know, so to speak, you know, with the voucher program within weeks or so, is there any way to do a reevaluation in stream, like in a year, to say, is there a way to bump that up? I know it's getting into the weeds maybe, but which we don't want to, but
Thanks,
Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor. It's a great question. I might nod to the Director of Finance about a budget amendment midstream, but you know, we're hopeful that, you know, anything that we do present will see a great deal of attraction from the community, and we look to, you know, the potential options, and we could certainly articulate some of those options as we bring the staff report back at what escalations with any one fiscal could look like. Being that it is reserve fund, we could be ambitious to put money into the budget, not forecasting too far away here. Underspend it within the confines of the program in anticipation that the program is super successful and still have those availabilities, so we could, you know, step ourselves out of the due process that way and continue with the program. So that, yeah, we can get creative. There's a ton of options that we could hopefully present to council that would be amenable to the community and the overall goals of the urban forest strategy.
Excellent. Thanks for the clarification. We do have a few lights on in the room here for Councillor Jolicoeur. I do see your hand still up, so I'm not sure if you're back in the queue. So I'll pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, very happy to see this come forward and the ideas that are in the report. I had talked to our city manager a while back about providing some kind of a partnership program for neighborhoods, particularly in those areas that have been impacted by infill. And interestingly, it tends to be West Courtenay because that's where the more mature trees are. And when we've had some developments come forward in the last couple of years, overwhelmingly the neighbors are very supportive of the housing piece. They're generally very happy to see more housing, but they're sad about the loss of the trees in their neighborhood. And so we talked about maybe there could be a way for those folks to have trees on their own property to try to, you know, offset that. But the other piece around that was around the social benefit of trees in neighborhood. I think it's kind of underrated in a way. Those of us who live in neighborhoods where there are trees or forests, woodlands, it's, you know, there's a social and health benefit to that. So I guess my hope would be that, you know, assuming that this all goes forward the way it's laid out, that we really kind of put some energy into, I mean, beyond kind of promotion of, you know, a tree voucher program, but I mean, I noticed that the neighborhood network strategy is coming up on the agenda, and I think there could be some real, I don't know whose word it is. I think it might be Kyle's synergies in terms of you know, linking those strategies together to really create some neighborhood sort of hype around, you know, planting trees, involving youth, involving seniors, really making it, you know, an event or something that's really positive, and hopefully that will help with getting people on board. And I guess I did have a similar question to Councillor Jolicoeur in terms of the targets, because, you know, we have an IMO 4,000 over 5 years, and our target number is significantly lower. So I would hope that we could find ways to up those numbers for sure. And then I have just one other question, Mayor, and that's around also, again, linking some of the things in our OCP together and around food systems. If there's some opportunities in some of our public places to, you know, we have the Harpston, that I know in the report it says we've kind of reached capacity in some ways in our existing public spaces and parks, but we do have some new things coming on board, McPhee Meadows, as well as the Harpston, you know, development there. So I'm hopeful that maybe we can come up with some creative ideas to incorporate some of that, you know, the canopy in those areas. And I would love to see some kind of partnership around food trees, nut trees, in terms of working with Lush or another organization. I know they're already helping maintain the fruit trees down in McPhee Meadows. And I know there's some water issues down there, accessible water, but there are some, I've been told by my farming and gardening friends that there are some, you know, permaculture and different ways to kind of mitigate those water concerns. And that's totally out of my realm of knowledge, but I'm just hopeful that this can be beyond just, you know, vouchers for trees, that we can really start to incorporate all these wonderful things in our OCP to kind of dovetail together. So those are my comments, and I guess I didn't necessarily have a question in there other than just increasing targets and incorporating into some of our new initiatives. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll have a comment there through Mayor to Councillor Moore. We've currently been working with the Community Development Coordinator who's sitting behind you, and we've been thinking, and we've had a couple of grassroots meetings already about how the arts culture can get involved, and communities and individual groups, and we kind of wrapped it around a lot of school districts in around Courtenay Elementary as being one targeted area where it is low canopy cover. So a lot of great conversations already starting through those comments that you've already brought up there. That's great.
And it looks like there's a subsequent.
Not a question, but just thank you for mentioning the school district, because that was also in my notes, like the opportunities with youth and school, and, you know, learning about climate change, learning why we're changing some of the trees that we're planting, because some species now are just not able. So I think there's just tons of opportunities there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor McCollum. Oh, sorry, Councillor Frisch. I
Okay,
jumped one.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that. Quick question about the voucher program. I'm just trying, I know you're coming back with a more fulsome report, but is the rough sketch to get like a really nice tree for 25 bucks or to get 25 bucks off a tree?
No, so again, lots of, sorry, through Mayor to Councillor Frisch. Lots of great ideas have come out of it already, but I think what we'd really like to see is a $25 voucher you purchase online and you get a $90, $100 tree for, like a significant tree for
Yeah.
that price.
Well, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that seems like a great incentive
Yeah.
versus the other way, which was kind of like, is it really?
That's
much?
right,
But
yeah.
anyways, you guys are thinking this through. You're the brains behind the program for sure. The other question is about the increase to budget. It looks like it's projected at maybe around $100,000 a year every year that we're using the program when it ramps up. If you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then sort of the source funding from that, did I understand right? It could come from some sort of our existing fees, or would it kind of come out of general taxation to some extent?
Thank you again, Councillor Frisch. I think the monies that we're talking about, a lot of the capital investments will be coming from development contributions as well. So as we increase development trees, they will be the ones paying for that part of it. And then the increase in our trees to get to that sort of 300 publicly planted trees, it would be that I guess by 2030, that's sort of $120,000 a year, which is significant, but yet reasonable for the amount of maintenance and time as those trees come on board and what staff are expected to kind of do to maintain those trees in a public inventory environment and make sure that we do the right. And then as those trees sort of get into that sort of nice, rapidly get more expensive, and then you hope that because you've planted well and you've looked after the soil conditionings, that you get this sort of longevity of where they don't cost you any money and you're just actually reaping the benefits of those trees until the end of their life when they start costing you money again.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I mean, for me, I agree, not inexpensive, but a high value for our community and livability. All right, thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the street tree aspect of the report. In looking at kind of how we are funding this and defining it, it was my interpretation that street tree is really referring to a tree planted on a new street, essentially, or in a new development or tied to new development. Is that correct? Or currently the current?
Currently, I'd say the majority of the street trees do come from developments. I mean, but we have planted a few trees in street trees along Cumberland Road just last fall. We have plans to try to create some more trees along right in front of this building. So we do add street trees in areas as sort of through paving aspects or capital projects. But a lot of it majority is development trees, yes.
Okay, that's good to understand because I wasn't totally clear because it shows an offset from new development that made me think that one new tree is in a development and offset by the developer. So I'm glad to hear that we are looking for ways to get trees on existing streets because of course we have some that are, well endowed and others not so much. But I wonder if in our future reporting back on this, that it might make sense to kind of differentiate between these two things, because adding trees to an existing street strikes me as a more complicated, sometimes more expensive endeavor than when it's included in a development. And of course, this type of additional tree has a significant community benefit when you're adding a tree to an existing road with high usage. It's expensive, but also that's probably the type that has the biggest impact to the public. So yeah, just because it's expensive, but we want to be thoughtful about it and it probably deserves some financial resources. So just in future discussions, I think it would be helpful for us to kind of consider those two things, even though they are obviously both a tree on the street, that they're not quite the same thing in terms of our decision making. So yeah, and it looks like you maybe want to say something, so I'll stop talking.
That's okay.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to Council McCollum. It's a great point. I think we've identified trees in a number of ways. We talk about trees operationally in a number of ways, how we identify and articulate exactly where they land. And I think what you're articulating to us is identifying boulevard trees as specific assets within the criteria of future development versus street trees, which inherently are funded and deployed within greenfield development. And we've articulated infill as something kind of different as well. So great feedback. We could definitely take that back and in a future update report, really articulate the differences of those and maybe offer some definitions. And I think as well as we move through some amendments with our team members over in development services through the bylaw amendments that'll clearly define the hierarchy of trees and the value of those trees as we go through. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And we have Councillor Jolker online again.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Numbers. I read this a few times, and I'm kind of curious because we've talked about, and it's articulated in the report, the different goals that we have, and I am looking forward to getting the update from our development services when they come back with the urban forest on how we're doing with all the goals, particularly around partnering and the protection, and how many trees we've had to permit out to be cut down, and how many we've been able to replant, which we do see in this report at least. But we have in the OCP 300 new trees on public land, and starting, I believe, on page 8 of the staff report, it speaks to what this 5-year plan would allow in terms of the increase. It's talking about 46% over 5 years, which is an additional 334 trees. And so I'm just trying to understand that with the graph that's on page 9, the colored graph that has a total of, starting in 2028 onwards, of 278 trees. So we have a 300 per year goal on public lands in the OCP, and this one is speaking to 278. And so I'm wondering what the discrepancy is, and if there's any areas that the staff report does speak, as Councillor Morin, there's apparently I guess a capacity issue with the parks, but I'm wondering if any of these other areas there is room to increase. It appears like restoration plantings, low cost, low maintenance, likely probably more rich ecosystems rather than in parks. And so, yeah, why the difference between 278 and the 300? And is there any other areas here within the publicly planted trees that we can potentially look at increasing?
Thank you. Maybe I'll tackle that one through the mayor to Councilor Jolicoeur. So great question. Love that you got into the numbers. So there's the number of 300 is the goal within the urban forest strategy. The 278 is what we project to be doing on a per annum basis. The difference of 334 is the cumulative total of trees that could be installed over that period of time, as we currently reside at 190 per year.
So we, in 2028, for example, the 278 that's net new above the 190?
No, that's total.
Total. So we're still not getting to the 300.
Correct.
Okay, and Mayor, if I could have a follow-up, then I think my other piece of my question was, is there, I would like to see us get to the 300. There was a lot of work that went into the urban forest strategy. We're doing the review. I don't imagine what development services is going to be coming back with. We need less trees, but maybe, perhaps, but especially with the abatement numbers and all the development that's happening and the trees that are being cut down. And so, yeah, curious if this 5-year plan if we can increase the numbers that are being presented to us to get to that 300. I'm not suggesting for next year. I think that there's a gradual increase for a reason. But yeah, just kind of curious to hear staff's perspectives on either why we can't get there or opportunities for us to improve the numbers that are being presented today.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, through the mayor to Councilor Jolicoeur, it's a fair question. And grain of salt, the numbers were projected based on greenfield development and anticipated tree requests that come through part of that program as well. And so That has yet to be determined, and those applications come in year over year. And so as those applications come in and those developments come to fruition, once they see first year through development, then the trees start to get installed. And so we're anticipating what the growth will look like. So that's forms part of the projection. There's the more firm part of the projection, which is what can we actually do as an operational group in terms of deployment. And you spoke to restoration planting. Those are always great. We can do a lot of trees in a small area through restoration. However, in talking with staff and understanding, those opportunities are becoming more and more limited within our urban environment in terms of what we've done. We've been quite proactive in those areas and work with some community partners, and we'll continue to engage and seek those opportunities, but they're not necessarily ones that are easily attainable for us in the short term until those areas start to come to fruition, or frankly, this does not include capital acquisition. As we talked about McPhee Meadows, there will be trees likely planted through that process, and this doesn't equate for those as well. So when we talk about an overall strategy for an urban forestry for our community, operational services plays a role. A small role as partnering through development services with greenfield development, but capital plays a role as well. And so if we were to take that cumulative total like over a 5-year period, we'd likely be there or close to with those numbers. But if you're looking for a fixed number for year over year for operational services, we can certainly make those amendments. They do come with staffing resource requirements. As Mr. Carmichael articulated at the very beginning of this statement, it's very costly to install trees, specifically boulevard trees or trees within residential development areas, whether that be old or infill. The upfront cost for establishment of trees is fairly costly, and then the first 5 years of insurance that they create their vitality and longevity of that tree is quite costly. So it takes a ton of staff time, a ton of resources to do that, and so that is an exponential increase that could happen over time if we're looking to expedite or those particular numbers. We'd definitely be looking to increase the amount of staff within the urban forest area to facilitate that particular request. We could certainly have that conversation through times of budget deliberation if those are some strategic goals of this council.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for that. I appreciate the context of what it looks like in practice to actually try to get to the goals that we set. I think that's really informative when we think about the goals that we've set through the OCP and the urban forest strategy and what's realistic. And I appreciate that you've highlighted we will eventually need to talk about resourcing. So happy to have that conversation. And I think everyone likes to be able to check off we've done that goal. And so I just would like to see us push for that 300. And I guess my last question, I guess I can't see who's in the room, but it's probably for our development services folks. In the staff report, it speaks to a few items of opportunity to, again, increase our tree canopy, particularly around the environmental development permit area guidelines. And it highlights examples like the one side of the street requirements. And so between that and and I appreciate that Councillor McCollum spoke to the tree permit revenue and the reserves to support the new program that will be developed. So the fee related to the permitting for tree cutting and that design standard for the two sides of the street rather than one side, is that part of the work that will be included in the urban forest strategy review?
Ms. Wade.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Jolkar. Thanks for that question. One of the things we're looking at is the update to the STS bylaw, where we will actually be looking at landscaping being subscribed in those streets cross sections, which are currently not in the STS. So that will help us to increase the tree canopy and also would be constructed to the specifications that we're looking for planting and be constructed by the developer in a greenfield situation.
And the fees, is that part of the scope for the review? The tree cutting permit fee?
In regards to the tree cutting permit fee, that would be something we would be looking at as far as the review to the fees and charges bylaw. And in the research that we'll be doing as far as the tree tree cutting bylaw update and also the subsequent work we'll be doing with the urban forest strategy.
Okay, great. Happy to hear that's included. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor Morin.
Thanks, Mayor. Just basically one more quick question. One of mine was taken by Councillor Jolicoeur around the planting on both sides of the street. I like the idea of that change. In terms of the restoration planting, which is the inexpensive practice, I know throughout the report it talked about there's been a lot of work in terms of assessing where trees are, what trees, what needs to replace. I mean, it's huge staff workload for sure. So I guess I was curious how we do identify these opportunities for restoration planting, and is the identification of that a huge staff resource? I guess I was curious about. It's not in the report, but what kind of staff resources might need to be increased if we pursue some of these ideas more aggressively.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor to Councillor Morin. The neat thing about the restoration plantings is they happen and occur in obscure areas of the city. So they're not really beneficial. I mean, yes, they're beneficial trees for habitat and bank stabilizations and trail networks, but they really don't get the really community value of that. So, to say that we're running out of those spaces or that there's more opportunity to have those restoration plantings, I don't think is really a staffing maybe issue, because they kind of come out of developments or sort of a poorly inherited asset area that we like, okay, that's an area that's sort of going to be hot on the list. And then also a good example of that is around the air park. And just making sure that, in some of our natural parks that we kind of keep looking at areas for restoration plantings. So not a big toll on staff. I think they kind of come up organically and be,
Right.
there, we need to kind of concentrate our efforts there. But again, the trees that come out of those areas aren't really community benefited trees, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But they're sort of self-identified, not a lot of workload.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor Ewing.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm curious about the tree plotter system that's noted on page 4. That's only keeping track of the city's trees, not trees on private property.
Correct. So thank you for a great question. The trees that are in the inventory on Tree Plotter are publicly managed trees. Yeah, not on private property.
That's a shame in a way, because my vision would be of something almost like the development tracker, so that we could keep track of trees, because as you know, we've had a couple of locations over the last year or two where a significant amount of trees have gone down and people never know why. And I'll give you a current example, 2 giant trees, maybe 3 at the corner of 4th and Harmston. And everybody in the neighborhood wonders, well, why did those trees have to come down? And because they're on private property, there's no way of finding out unless you actually talk to the person who owns the property, which presumably you can do, but it just seems that it would be good if there was some way of notifying people. Staff and council are well aware of the reaction we had when a couple of greenfields, the trees were all cut basically in areas that people had taken for granted for a long time as almost part of their neighborhood. We all get very attached to the trees in our neighborhood. So I'm just curious about whether there's some way that we can provide information to people in the community about why trees on private property come down when they do, if it's a significant either number or a significant type of tree.
And I do see Ms. Wade. Wade,
Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian, I wanted to just highlight one of the tasks before us in the Development Services Department is actually we're going to be doing LiDAR mapping. The current tree metrics used in the OCP was based on a very high level GIS. So we're going to be drilling down and have much more accurate information. And so we're looking at embarking on that this year, so that we have that mapping that will help us do a better gap analysis on the trees in general on the community, and then we can decipher between public and private. And then we also are looking at, as we go through the OCP, we do have a third-party consultant, registered biologist, that is helping to support us in how we go about doing some more restorative actions in regards to properties and how we bring that into development as well, which we can always utilize in with our colleagues in the other areas in the city. So there, some areas are identified for where we can probably do some enhanced restoration as well. So we're looking at all those things right now, and the metrics are right now are being sorted out from a high level to a much more specific level, so we can work with our colleagues in gap analysis and have a much more strategic initiative towards the trees.
Yeah, sounds good. Doesn't necessarily solve the problem of how the community knows what's going on, but I guess having the information is a good start. Perhaps with your leave, Mayor, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion, one comment.
Yes, through the mayor to Council Henry, I just wanted the new development tracker actually has tree cutting permits on it, and it's interactive. So I just wanted to highlight, sorry, I didn't get to that quick enough.
Sorry, but we do have a motion that carried, so thanks so much, council. Thanks for the information to staff to helping us move through this. It's very exciting to see this moving along, so thank you very much. And that was a recommendation. So I think next we have the Community and Social Development Framework and Plan Update. And the podium mic is already on. I'm not sure if there's introductions, but you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Joanne Bays, the Community Development Coordinator with Recreation, Culture and Community Services. And I'm very delighted to be here today to give you an update on progress with the Community and Social Development Framework and Action Plan for the City of Courtenay. If you recall, back in July, it just went by so fast. I came to council and I presented a staff report which outlined the rationale, the approach, the scope, steps to establish this community development framework and action plan. And I remember saying, you know, oh, gee, I thought I was going to have to develop a framework, but it turns out we've got a great OCP, which has a vision and it has cardinal directions and it tells us the guiding principles. So it also tells us an approach to a community development action plan. So we had a lot already there. I just showed the emerging framework at that time. But what we were missing was the action plan. We have a framework, we don't have a plan. We have lots of priorities. And so then I talked about other areas that have these community and social development frameworks. And they're co-created usually with influential leaders, which can be people with lived experience, and change makers who come from the various social determinant areas. And they come to a table and they co-create, they co-implement, and they co-evaluate community and social development in their area. And some are, Penticton is an example, Terrace has a new one, Vancouver has one, so we like that and we want to get there. But it's going to take a bit of time because we've got lots of collaborative tables. We've got lots of groups working on our social determinants of health. So I needed, recognizing I needed to build strong, trusting relationships because this is a big ask for people to come together like that. And I needed to also maybe just start out with a couple of strategies that could inform the development of that plan. And so council agreed that we could move forward. Resolution was passed on 2 strategies. One is the Better Together strategy, and the other is a neighborhood network strategy. And to remind you, the Better Together strategy was about bringing together the service providers primarily and local government who are engaged in social and community development as a first, right? To illuminate the landscape of work that they're doing along a continuum of systems change. To really have a look at what is going on. Where are we focused with all of our efforts, a majority of our efforts? Where are there gaps? Where are there overlaps? But importantly for us, how do we show up at those tables? What are the priorities? And how does city councilors and staff show up at these community development tables? Because we're being stretched. I can tell you, I am at many, many, many tables. And so this was about coordinating and helping move upstream our work. And I didn't want to duplicate what was already going on. So looking for partners who are already doing this and how can I kind of help kickstart that? So I've been meeting with, for example, the community Comox Valley Health Network to see if we could go work with them and also with other leaders in the other social determinant domains. And I'm excited to say that we've come up with a potential strategy. There, we talked about an event that would, celebrate what we've done, bring people together, celebrate what we've done. Also, look back. What did we say we were going to do? Look forward. What's our Planapalooza look like? And then action. Okay, like where's the spots where we can really kick up our work? And then what's our role in that? And in the process, really strengthen relationships so that I can come up with that table if it's possible. It might be a Comox Valley table, but we need to know for Courtenay what we're doing. So that's one thing that I continued on after our last meeting. The other was the neighborhood network strategy, and that one is pretty exciting. Had a couple of citywide neighborhood gatherings and some follow-up work as well. In the neighborhood gatherings, really it was about that again, looking at interest. Do we have champions out there in different neighborhoods who are already doing things or people who want to do more? And I was also looking for people who might want to sit at a table. Again, that's a community development table. And activation ideas. And so just kind of exploring and mapping. We were also doing some community neighborhood mapping to see what that would look like, the tool. And so I walked away from those. Okay, so now we're at a plan. We need to really develop the strategic plans for each strategy. So they need communications, they need evaluation and implementation. How are we going to do that? And so now we're in a process of hiring some people to work with me. And they will, I'm excited, they're just about here. And their job is to help us get that plan together and the activation and the evaluation of it. So those will be the next steps. And activation is pretty exciting. When I, kind of like a bumblebee, I'm out there and I find out there's something going on. How do I bring people together to help move it upstream? And I'm glad we had the the urban strategy presentation just before that, because one of the spinouts of the community development or the neighborhood network sessions was bringing a group together because we possibly could snag $150,000. So we bring these people together and it involved looking at growing our urban forest and the edible understory. So when we kind of looked at that together, we had planning, and we had engineering in the room. We had, your community developer here, and we had parks in the rooms. We all came together, and then we had different people who come to council with requests for funds. The Youth Ecological Restoration Society, the new climate BC Youth Climate Action Group. So we had various people. We had the VHA. We all brought them all in the room together and said, is there something we can do together in neighborhoods to advance this work? And so there's a lot of excitement and work, under background work, but it's about synergies. How can we work together? How can we move upstream? Can we do a few demonstrations? And there is, I think it's going to move forward. We're going to start with working with the youth group that we have just funded I wanted to say too, what started this was funds for equity deserving groups who are interested in addressing climate change in neighborhoods. That's where the money was. And it was like equity deserving groups. It all comes back to, if we talk about Indigenous youth, they want to start with kids. Yeah, when we're digging into the ground and that kind of thing, we are sort of addressing issues of connectedness, health, well-being. It starts with young people connected to each other and doing something that makes them feel they have some control in their lives. And if we start with at-risk youth, even better. So I just want to give you a spin out of trying to figure out which neighborhoods and what exciting things are out there and what are the champions. Our idea is that in the activation phase, we're going to have the Better Together event or strategy. And the other thing is we're looking for 4 hubs of neighborhood activity, placemaking activity within the next 18 months. So that's our target. And we're going to build in an evaluation that shows impact. Okay, impact of this approach and impact of it in its sort of ripple effect in terms of the social determinants. And also we want to come out away from the Better Together strategy with an understanding of what's our emerging role, priority, and directions when it comes to social determinants of health. And so the final phase, the one thing that's changed in this is it's another 6 months. The final phase is going to be now, hopefully we'll cultivate that table of leaders in the next 18 months through these actions. And we will get that long-term strategy, long-term plan developed. So we're hoping that's done by the end of June 2027. And that's my update. I'm happy to take questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the presentation and the report. It's much appreciated, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I certainly appreciate the examples that you gave of things that could start to happen. I think that's really important. Of course, community building and it's a little bit enigmatic. It's a little hard to define sometimes, and it's often very personal. And I can only imagine how much work there is that sounds like you're doing on your own in a lot of ways, going around and trying to pull everyone together in a fun and pleasing way that will continue on. I think in the report you mentioned that some of the most successful examples of these sort of social development groups are sort of co-led by community members. And I guess that's what you're looking for is where's the energy, right? Because a top-down framework probably isn't going to do it. You want to support ground up work. So I really appreciate that. And I hope over the next 18 months, we can hear more about projects coming to life and what sort of things the community is latching onto. Probably you couldn't tell us which ones are going to be successful, but maybe if we just, put a little bit of effort into a bunch of them and see which ones take off, it could be really great. So thanks for this work, and I'm happy to support this.
Thank you.
All right. I think I heard Councilor McCollum move receipt. Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch seconding that. And this is just for receipt, so I'll just assume council is in agreement with that. And we're at the witching hour. Oh, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do have some curiosities around the timeline. Quite a lengthy timeline for planning events. So I'm just wondering why, I think it's potentially over a period of 4 quarters for an event to be planned. So I'm wondering what's the challenge with organizing an event. I think you've articulated something that I think many of us on council know is that a lot of the leaders in the community who I know you're out connecting with and building relationships with are already highly connected to each other at different tables. And so, I guess I'm just a little concerned around the length of time that we have here for the logistics of an event or multiple events? I think you've listed 5 here. So that's my first question. I do have another question about the events, but that's my first.
Are you, the events, do you mean the Better Together event? Okay, are you talking about the neighborhood network?
Yes, thanks for
Events.
that. The Better Together events.
Yes, Councillor Jolker, or Mayor through Councillor, through to Councillor. I really want to see co-creation of this. And so, yes, I could have easily just pulled together and made an event happen, but I really wanted to work with the community that's already engaged in this area. And one of the key partners is, as I said, the Comox Valley Community Health Network. They really were in a stage where they want this to happen, but they're in transition right now, as you're probably aware, in their governance. So that kind of slowed it down a little bit there. But now I'm just like, we're going to move ahead because we do have the other leads from the other social development areas, and we're going to do that. To actually create a citywide conference is what I'm hoping we'll do. It could be smaller though. It takes about a year. We're at a stage of where we have the themes. We have as well objectives, goals, objectives, outcomes. We have the partners. So I'm thinking by fall, we should probably be developing a program and that kind of thing. So, you know, maybe I'm saying, I'm just giving it the longer time frame, but by fall, you should be seeing some information on that. And
Yeah.
I also should like to point out as well, if you looked at, I'm sure you've read the whole report, but this is all being done in the context of the other demands that come with this position that, you know, I've been managing the Strengthening Communities report, the winter storage strategy. These are all social development issues, the substance use collective there, renegotiating and managing their contract. So I just want to say it's in between, you know, equity in the bathrooms. So half of my life is on responding to things we have a commitment to. And then the other half is trying to pull together these 2 strategies. So that's as fast as I can work.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you kind of naming that, and you highlight, I think, some really key activities that we've been able to support as a result of you being in the role on page 3, which I actually think are, and you've brought a lot of reports back on those items, and I think that's actually been a huge value added. I know that we're hearing about that in community, that they've appreciated that we've dedicated a resource to help navigate the complexities in between systems for things like grants and leading projects specifically. And so thanks for highlighting that. Yeah, and I think the other curiosity that I had, and apologies, I think I was referring to the multiple themes for the one event, was related to one of the themes, visioning a thriving community. And I'm curious how you think that might play out in regards to how we've done quite an extensive piece of work around the vision for the community through the OCP. And I'm wondering if you've given any thought around what might come of this event and how we might either enhance or how this might be able to be a part of some of the work that's happening in development services.
Well, I haven't really went to connect it with development services yet, but this is really, maybe the language wasn't so wonderful or didn't match right up with our OCP, but the idea is to look back on what we said we would do. So there's what the city said we had as a vision, that emerging framework. I didn't call it the final framework because I'm going to have community in there, right? And the community informed that vision, so it should resonate with everybody, but there's always the door open that they might want something a little different. And then I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But yeah, I think we're going to look back at it. I can't see it taking a long time, but just sort of making sure we're all on the same page as we move forward. So we look back and we move forward. So acknowledging where we've been. That's really what the visioning is about. It's not about creating a new vision. Well, I hope not.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Joanne, for the report. And I guess I wanted to respond a little bit to the timeline piece. I think this kind of work, from coming from this sector, working in social services and doing a little bit of community development work throughout that, it's not easy to kind of set a timeline on it, because much of the work is relationship building and developing trust. And I think the other piece is that with the neighborhood work, you know, each group of people may have different priorities or different visions. And I think, you know, it's complicated, and we're responding. I mean, part of the reason we have this, we've have this under Rec and Cultural Services now, is because we identified a need to do this work. And I think, yeah, it's in response to very complex problems that we're dealing with. And we're trying to frame it in a positive light, like celebrating assets and taking the assets that we have in the community. So I guess I'm not as concerned about the timeline for that, because I think that work is difficult. And I'm hoping that if the community is really involved, the folks are really involved, as you're suggesting, you know, really taking a lead on this, then there's more buy-in, and hopefully we build, you know, stronger neighborhoods and create understanding of, you know, the social problems that we have, and that, you know, blossoms into the rest of the community. So anyway, I just appreciate the work. I think that just as part of a planning process lately, people have different timelines on how they process and how they do planning. And it's not always easy in this kind of work. It's not like, and not to minimize anybody else's work, but you know, if you have I mean, obviously infrastructure projects can go over time, and you know, there can be something happen with a part that doesn't come in, and all those things happen for sure. But when you're dealing with people, it's kind of a whole different ball game in terms of navigating all that. So I just wanted to make those comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Well, it's been moved and seconded, and we've had some great conversation around this, but I think at this point, we'll receive it unanimously for council, and we'll take our dinner break now, and we'll return in about 25 minutes, which would be 6:40 is the aspirational goal. Thank you. All right, we're gonna get going in the next minute or so. Councillor Zolker, if you're online, you can turn your camera and mic back on. All right, everybody, we'll get back into our special council meeting and we'll continue with item 5.1.1 bylaws for third reading. And we'll start with the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3177, 2025, forming character development permit area. And that was part of today's public hearing. And all right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Next, we'll get into 5.1.2 zoning amendment bylaw number 3176. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? And motion carries. And we'll move into 5.2.1 business license amendment bylaw 3133. And are there any questions or comments? Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Thanks very much. And starting with Councillor Hillian.
Just to be clear, Mayor, is this the one that we got the written comment on?
I believe that was the single comment. Did you want to speak to
I
it?
just wonder if staff want to respond to it. I didn't fully understand the written comment. It seemed to.
Oh, it's the next one.
Oh, it's the next one?
Yeah,
All right, we'll leave it
start
to,
next
we'll
one
leave
as
it to
well.
the next one then. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, quickly, I was just going to confirm that this is a pretty minor one that we're looking at, and maybe staff could just quickly, like, 1 minute recap of what this one is versus the next one.
Ms. Wade.
Through the mayor to Councillor Fish. Yeah, the first one, which is the business licensing amendment, is just to adjust the fees, to adjust,
Right.
to reflect, to add in fees for short-term rental.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate that. I do believe it was moved and seconded and we've got those. So all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And 5.2.2. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And Councillor Frisch.
No, thanks. I just wanted to comment on this. I made some comments last time we talked about this bylaw. Of course, we're following partly the province's lead on this. But I know a lot of our council really wanted to see something in this area come through to help our rental rates. And I just wanted to highlight that I really think that this bylaw should be reviewed, maybe in a year. I know we were looking at maybe reviewing it in a longer period, but based on our current rental, what am I trying to say? Vacancies right now, which look quite good based on a lot of the hard work that the city's been doing to encourage more building and rentals. I think it would be worthwhile seeing this come back, a report coming back on how this is doing and how our vacancies are looking sooner than later. Thanks.
Thanks for the comment. And Councillor Hillian.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just repeat if we could get some staff commentary on the written comment that we did receive, which I found a little bit confusing in terms of what the person was trying to express.
All right, Ms. Wade.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. Yeah, the comment was the person was requesting that we be more prescriptive and limit 2 people per bedroom up to the 3 bedrooms. I am aware other municipalities have done something similar, but we wanted to be more flexible and align with our neighbors in Cumberland and Comox in regards to, for example, in Cumberland, it's 3 bedrooms and 6 people, and in Comox, it's up to 6 people. We are certainly happy to review that, with our suggested monitoring on this. But we were really trying to be flexible and not as prescriptive.
All right, thanks for that clarification. And I do see we've got Councillor Moore and Frisch here and Councillor Jolicoeur online. I'll try to update you, Councillor Jolicoeur, on whose lights are on before you speak, just so you know if there are others waiting. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to kind of the review, are we basing kind of the only information we can gather is the general vacancies in town? We don't have any way to determine whether these yeah, to determine anything beyond that. So I guess we can look at that for sure. But I guess I would say, even though we, in the reporting, we're hearing that there's the vacancies lower, but anecdotally, we certainly don't hear that. So I don't think it's moved the dial, because every day I hear from people who are trying to find a place to rent. So I think it's still a significant issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Appreciate that. And Councillor Jolicoeur. And again, we do have light on in here.
Thanks. Yeah, just one question. Sometimes you have to see it a few times to catch something. On page 3 of the bylaw, there's the amendment to Division 7 around the number of off-street parking. So we have here one space for the short-term rental operation. And I guess kind of in follow-up to the member of the public's comments around restrictions on individuals per bedroom, this was based on the short-term rental, notwithstanding how many bedrooms or how many individuals can book the unit. Okay. And so how do we suspect, and I'm not sure where we're at with the off-street parking work that was done around the SHMU and just general with the zoning, all the work that Development Services is leading, but do we have any understanding around what the impact will be in terms of that initial analysis that was done a few months ago with the existing short-term rental accommodations that are at least on the online platforms? I think we had around 200 and something, relative to how many of them, for example, are 3 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms versus 1 bedrooms. I guess I'm just trying to understand, how we landed on the 1, and how that might impact off-street parking as a whole. If in fact, say there is, I guess, 6 people, 2 per bedroom for a 3-bedroom. I doubt that we'll have 6 vehicles, but yeah, just curious if staff can speak to how they came to this and what they foresee being an impact on the larger off-street parking work that's being done.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. So first of all, the reason the 1 is in there is in regards to that there'll be current parking requirements for the housing forms that are there already. So if somebody is renting out those, either the principal, like a house, or if they're renting out a suite, parking will be associated with that. So that parking will be on site. And then we're just acknowledging that there has to be a designated spot on site for the short-term rental accommodation. And that is the requirement, that there has to be 1 stall that is designated for that. I think you had another question. Did I forget something?
It was just the general thinking around how this might impact the larger off-street parking and on-street parking work that we're doing, or that your team is leading.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, one of the things we would do is, we would monitor this, like as part of our 3-year monitoring, and see what the impacts are. Currently, we have through bylaw, we haven't had any complaints, in regards to parking. So it's undetermined at this point. We are aware, historically, when short-term rentals come up, to look at parking. Parking has been an issue. That's why we're saying that we have to make sure there's dedicated parking on site for short-term rental.
Excellent. Thanks for that clarification. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. Just, excuse me, just a couple more points. My understanding was that the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation does studies on vacancy rates and does kind of parse it out to 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom and so on. Not sure if that's completely accurate, but that's what I've seen in the past. And I also wanted to point out that adding more oversight to someone's primary residence doesn't necessarily create more rentals because somebody's already living there and may only be renting it out when they go away. So I'm not necessarily in having as much oversight over those situations. And other than that, yeah, I appreciate staff's work and trying to find a middle ground on this. And so I'll be supporting it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Councillor Frisch. I don't see any further questions or comments. So with that, call the question. All those in favor? And motion carries. And next we're on to 5.2.3 Municipal Ticket Information Amendment Bylaw 3139. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? And I see Councillor Jolicoeur online.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think just a question of clarification. So the first page of the bylaw speaks to what we're being asked to amend. But I'm a little confused because then under Appendix 3, Schedule 1, there's a bunch of, on the left-hand side, little boxes that say new NO, new numbers. And so when the bylaw speaks to amending number 3 with the schedule, so it's all those items that say new that are what's being amended to the existing Appendix 3. Is that correct?
Ms. Wade.
Yep, through the mayor to Councillor Joko, that's correct.
Okay, if I can have a follow-up, Mayor, in that case. There's a few items in here I'm not sure we've spent a ton of time talking about. I don't know if necessarily we do, but there's a few themes in the additions, particularly around food vending. And so I'm just wondering if staff can speak to where this came from. Was this as a result of some issues in the community bylaw or otherwise? I think there's maybe 2 or 3 around food vending.
Ms. Wade.
Yep, through the mayor to Councillor Joko. Yes, these have been items that staff has been tracking. And so with this opportunity to amend the MIT, that we've done that to make sure that we can cover that off.
Thanks.
All right, and Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Do we even allow exotic dancing anymore? Because I didn't think that we did. And so I was just surprised to still see that there.
Ms. Wade.
Through the mayor to Councillor Moran. Yes, those would be part of our housekeeping issues as we move forward in the next little bit, but it's there and we're gonna have to address it.
Mhm.
Sorry, I didn't completely hear that.
So I think the business licensing
Yeah.
bylaw, which is different from this, is
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay, so that
we're
will be
making all those
amended.
changes. So
Yeah.
when the business licensing bylaw comes forward in the fall, we'll be addressing we'll be repealing and replacing it so that it actually has the up-to-date terminologies.
Okay.
modernizing.
Thank you.
Modernizing.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Councillor Moran, and for that clarification. Councillor Jolicoeur, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so again, I think I was a little confused because the subheader, thanks, Mayor, the subheader is short-term rental accommodation, yet most of the amendments, I'm trying to understand how they have any relation to short-term rental accommodation.
That could be a typo. Just looking to staff to confirm if that. And basically under 5.2.3, it says municipal ticket information, and then brackets, it says short-term rental accommodation.
Through the mayor to Councillor Joko, yes, it's just the name because it's associated with the short-term rental accommodation.
Right, so we've used this opportunity to add some numbers for the new business licensing for short-term rentals while also adding additional ones. Okay, thanks. I think I'm clear now. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. I don't see any further questions or comments, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And the motion carries. And we do have some bylaws for adoption, starting with the downtown Courtenay revitalization tax exemption amendment.
Move.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? Motion carries. And moving on to 6.2, property 2025 property tax rate bylaw number 3179. It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All those in favor? Any opposed? And we are moved in camera. Thank you.
Mayor, it's just going to take me a minute to move over to the new Zoom.
Excellent. We were just gonna say exactly that. So we'll stand by.